Welcome back to the channel. This is The Casuals. I'm Jin,
And I'm Saki.
and today's episode is Anime Talk. And so we're gonna go over to two different animes. They're both kind of like not like the ones, not like World Trigger where there's a lot to explain and a lot to go over. They're pretty simple, straightforward animes because they're both one season and 12 episodes each. And so this is not right after, but it's like some time after we had watched World Trigger, so maybe been like maybe 2 or 3 weeks, maybe I think.
I think it was like 2 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, 2 weeks. About 2 weeks later, we watched another anime. This is a third anime that I introduced him. The second anime didn't go so well. It was just not the right fit for him, so we ended up just foregoing it and moving on to a new anime. And so the third anime I introduced to him was Grand Blue. And I told you, I was like, you're in for a ride for this one. Because so the second anime that he was exposed to was the thing called Log Horizon. It's kind of like an isekai type deal, where these guys are like transported into a game world, and they're like, well, what do we do now? And like the whole thing is like them figuring out. So it's like a fantasy type thing, just the same thing like as World Trigger. World Trigger is more closer to sci-fi, and so this was a completely new one where it's more like full-on comedy. And Grand Blue is, unique, let's just say. And so the very first episode, it starts off perfectly normal. It starts off with a young guy who's just started with college. His name is Iori. And he's like, yeah, I'm gonna experience my college life. You know, this is a new chapter in my life. And he goes to what's called a swim shop. And he's like, yeah, I'll be staying over here, with my, I think uncle. I think that's what it was. He was like, I'll be staying with my uncle, and he's like, I'm gonna start my college life, new chapter, right? And he like sees a beautiful girl swimming off in the distance, and he's like interns, and then he gets called to the front, and he goes into the front, and he's like, and he gets to the door, and he's like, time to begin my new, step into my new life, and he opens the door, and what do you see, Saki?
Honestly, it was pretty much two. I don't remember if they were like fully, but I think almost naked men.
They were fully naked.
Oh, they were fully naked? Okay, I couldn't remember. But yeah, it just goes from 0 to 100 so fast.
You hear them go, John, Gen, Born, which is basically rock, paper, scissors. And there's this bunch of naked men. There's two main ones that you see, but there's just a bunch of naked men, like literally naked. I'm not talking about like, they had their underpants on, they were like, wearing boxers. No, they're just full on naked. All you see covering their, male genitals is a black circle. That was the censor.
Yeah, that was the only censor, really.
Yeah, and you just see them go, yeah, like you just hear them yell, right? Like screaming. And man, that made an impression on you, didn't it?
It did. I was just like, well, that literally changed directions very quickly. And I'm like, okay, let's see where this goes. And I just kept watching.
You were kind of expecting something to be like, a twist when he opens the door because it was such a big build-up. But yeah. I don't think anything could have prepared you for that, right?
No, I was not thinking it in that direction at all. I was thinking maybe it's like maybe a group of people like getting, ready to go into like the ocean or something,
yeah.
Like the swim shop. But I was not expecting that.
And right away, you can tell, like, this is full on, like, comedy. There's no romance, no beautiful school life, no nothing. Just full on comedy, right?
Yeah, it was 100% comedy, and honestly, as we kept watching, it just got better and better to me.
And I think one of the more memorable things is like, he himself, the main character named Iori, right? He was like, you guys are fucking crazy, right? He's like, you're crazy. Like, what is wrong with you guys? and he's like, I gotta get out of here. And the two main people who were drinking, I'm forgetting their names off the top of my head right now. They're like, hold up, we have a newbie, fresh meat. And so,
Initiation.
Yeah, and so he's like I don't want to, they drag him, like some stuff comes, like drag him back into the store, and they're like, they were making fun of him. It's like, oh, you little girl, like you can't handle your drinks, and Yuri gets pissed off. He's like, what? And so he joins drinking up to them, right? And it immediately cuts to the scene where there's this girl coming up. I'm forgetting her name, Chisa, and she's finished up. She's implied that she's finished up with whatever she's doing, and she's walking back into the store, and she's like, "Oh, I haven't met Yuri in a while because she's his cousin." It's like, I wonder. It's like I haven't seen him in a while. I'm pretty excited to meet him, right? And then she opens the door. Round 2, baby.
Except he joined them.
He joins them, and you just see him full on naked, and he's just drinking, and he's like, "You ain't got nothing on me."
Just that Chad energy going around.
And then you just see him, like, he's like, "Oh, hi, Chisa," and she immediately just looks disgusted and walks away. And so he's just like, "My life is ruined now." And then so it's late at night, and he's like, "Oh, well, I gotta stop drinking now, right? I have to get to school." And they're like, "Oh, it's fine. We'll get you to school on time, right? Don't worry about it." And so he's like, "Oh, okay." He was kind of like half convinced or something like that, but he ended up drinking, blacking out. And so he's waking up, right? And the next scene is just, he wakes up. He's like, "Oh crap, I gotta go to school." He sits up, and then he just looks around, and there's the school building.
I mean, they got him to school.
There's 3 of them naked on the floor, drunk, with people surrounding them taking
grass. Yep.
Yeah. Taking pictures of them. And he was like, what on earth? Like, he's like, "You're supposed to take me to school." And he's like, "Yeah, we took you to school." Half drunkenly, admittedly.
I mean, they did get him there. They didn't break his promise, so.
They never said which condition he was going to be in. They just said, "We'll get you to school." And they did.
That is true. He didn't say, "I would need to be at school sober and fully clothed." They never said that.
And so he's sitting in class. He's like, I wonder why everyone's avoiding me, as he's literally half naked with only boxers on.
Yeah, I still remember. I think it was later. He found his cousin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "I need help. I need your help." And she's like, "Why?" She's like, "Give me your clothes." And then it literally just goes blank, and then it goes, "Officer, this man wants my clothing." And I was like, "Yes." And he's like, no, that's not what I meant." And she's like, he wants me to take off my clothing right here." I was just like, oh my god.
He demands it.
He was demanding her clothing. It was
He
hilarious.
was threatening me. Because he threatened her, remember? He's saying that, "Oh, I'm gonna tell everyone that I'm your cousin."
Yeah. And it backfired.
It backfired heavily. And so we were introduced to another new character, kind of like, he was kind of shown briefly first in the college room scene. It wasn't until later where he interacts more with, his name is Kitahara, and he's a blonde dude, right? And he's what you would call an otaku. Straight up, full on otaku. Like, he cares all about the 2D world, right? Mm-hmm. And you'd be like, typically you'd be like, "Oh god, he's an otaku, right?" Little did you know, he's equally as bad in the shenanigans in terms of the drinking department.
Yeah, they just I don't even know if they recruited him, but yeah, it's basically
he kind of just dragged along, didn't get formally introduced in the club. He literally was dragged along in the drinking event, because remember they held a drinking event on the school campus?
Yep.
Or maybe I think it was on the school campus, yeah.
Yep, he did. I remember that.
And then here comes the iconic thing where it's like, "Is this water?" "Yeah, it's water." Takes out a Bic lighter, puts it on the water, it flames up.
Man, that basically means it's alcohol.
And then they were like, "What do you mean this is water?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's basically water. And mind you, this alcohol is clear, which implies it's vodka."
Right.
I think it was like, 90% of alcohol content? In the anime, it's exaggerated, right? But it was like 90% alcohol content. Or something like that. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, and then I think someone else was trying to hand him water, and he checked again, and it was more vodka.
It was so funny, too.
He was like, "Oh, here's some water." And then Iori's like, "Hold up, wait a minute. lights it, and it's just another flame, and he's just like, really?
And that's basically kind of like a lot of the joke is where it's heavily involved with alcohol, right? By the way, we don't endorse heavy drinking to the point where you black out.
Drink responsibly.
You drink responsibly if you're gonna drink. But this anime was just off the rails hilarious, right? And then like maybe like 2 episodes later, we finally get to the scuba diving.
Yes, it did take a couple episodes. But once we got to the scuba diving, it was hilarious. Those two really big, muscular guys.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, we're naked, we drink a lot. And then once it became to the actual scuba diving, they're like the most serious things ever. And I was like, wow, that really changed pace.
Yeah. And for a good reason, scuba diving is dangerous if you do not learn the proper procedure. And, to them, they love scuba diving. They want to share scuba diving. And of course, they would do it responsibly. So, despite like the shenanigans of them drinking heavily, like being irresponsible to the max when it comes to drinking, it shows a different side to them when they do something that they really love. And I think that's like a cool thing,
Yeah, it was a good like
kind of like tune.
like chemistry.
Yeah, chemistry tune switch,
Yeah, they were like, oh, we're goofballs, but we're also serious about safety.
doing what we love and caring about others and doing the proper procedure. They like literally like if you tried joking about anything, I think one time they tried implying doing some like stupid things underwater. Like don't do that. Like straight up, just don't. And the reason why is they always say this: your life is always at risk when you're doing it. It is not worth it, right? So do the proper procedure. And so it's nice of them to take it seriously. And then when they actually go scuba diving, the funny thing is that Iori cannot swim. That's the funny thing. He cannot swim. He just doesn't know how to swim. And so he's like, how can I go scuba diving when I don't swim, right? And I think one of the bigger lessons driven through this like anime, and especially more so in the manga, is you have to try things differently, or else you're never gonna change,
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's really kind of like a point in case, especially with this series in the anime and manga, where it's like, well, you don't know how to swim, but just because you don't know how to swim doesn't mean you can't go scuba diving,
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's
You just gotta think of it in a different way.
Yeah, and I think like it shows his reluctance at first. Like it does a really good job of him being like really reluctant to go underwater because he doesn't know how to swim, and then like him eventually opening up and seeing like the beauty of like actually scuba diving and seeing what's underneath the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that's why I particularly enjoyed it, because despite its comedy, it still has its like moments of like, look at this beautiful thing, look at this moment. You're living in the moment, right? And appreciate for what it is, and like that you can experience it, and that itself is really cool.
Yeah, I do want to note that I wasn't expecting it to be like serious when it came to the scuba diving, just because of the shenanigans that came in the first couple episodes. So when they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna go scuba diving, and I'm like, oh okay, and then I don't know why my brain was like, watch the dude poor Iori go into the water, and there's just like a giant shark right there. Or something. Like, I was expecting more comedy, but it was serious, and I was like, oh, that's kind of nice for leaving.
And I think the best part is that with Iori, right? There's a small I guess quote unquote hidden quirk that he has, is that it's not really, how do you say this, hammered in until later in the manga. It's shown briefly, like it's kind of like hinted at throughout the series, is that Iori himself is extremely tolerant of others, right? Despite, no matter how crazy they are, no matter how how they think about him, no matter what action they take, obviously as long as they don't actually harm others, we'll get to that in a bit. He's actually very tolerant. He's very like he tolerates them a lot. Like it doesn't matter how wild you are, he will accept you for who you are. That's why he's friends. He became like he got along really well despite them trying to kill each other multiple times. He got along really well with Kitahara the otaku, right? Because Kitahara the otaku is portrayed as like some bad, crazy, anime dude who like only worships animes, and even that, like he's like he would stick up for him.
Yeah, that was a nice like thing. Like he accepts pretty much everyone.
Yeah, and it's,
Not
and then and then we get to this point where it shows a major, like, I guess, characterization of him is that, like, we meet another person who's nicknamed Keiki. Do you remember her?
Yes, was that? I believe I know who you're talking about.
She's the one with the heavy
The heavy
makeup.
makeup.
And her name is Aina, right?
Hmm.
And so we see Keiki, like, she's masked in makeup, like basically a clown type deal, right?
Yeah, it basically was a clown. Yeah.
Yeah. In his view, in our view, and you know, what's it called? It's throwing you off. You're like, who's this person? And they act frivolous, right? And you kind of think badly of them. And then, first impression's really bad, of course, on her, as a viewer and even in the story. And then you realize makeup off, she's a normal person.
Yeah. She was just, I guess, trying to fit in is what she was going through, right?
Fit in, and also she was kind of like she joined their tennis club, right? Their university tennis club, and she was like the butt of the joke essentially. And she knew she was the butt of the joke, and she wasn't liked, but she only did it to fit in. And it turns out later on that the senior, like the male dudes, the male members of the tennis club insulted her badly. And despite the Kitahara, the blonde dude, and then Iori, the main character, initially not getting along, being like kind of shocked to the way she acted. She didn't act that great against them when they first met. They found out that she was being basically bullied, like straight up bullied. They took revenge, and in a good way, because there was a whole fiasco about entering the beauty pageant, because there was a beauty pageant event and there was a category for men, cross-dressing men, and Iori was like, I'm no way in heck am I going to join this, right? But after he heard, like, he was like, I will like kill other people to not join. That's how like much he didn't want to join. And do you remember that fiasco between those two? They were like, hell no, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
And then after they heard she was bullied, they were just like, we're entering in. Yeah. And they tricked the dude to get revenge back at that dude who made fun of her. So that tells you a lot about their characterization in terms of these two. That they're, they have a sense of, I guess, almost justice, but more like they think if something's wrong, they're gonna get back at you for sure.
Yeah, like they don't take, they don't take anything.
They don't take BS. They think that bullying others is not cool. So
which it isn't.
It isn't, of course. And so it's an overall good lesson. And then I think we get to the point where the turning point really is when, how do you say this? When they go to Okinawa for their scuba like licensing trip and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it's shown that Yuri, despite not liking the water, despite still being reluctant and everything, he still tries his best in like trying to do scuba and his scuba license, right? And through one series of unfortunate events, we're not gonna spoil too heavily. He gets sick, unfortunately, so he can't take his scuba license. And I think he even failed. So
yeah, that's right.
He failed one part. I think he could have made it up, but then he still failed anyways. And then he couldn't make up the part because he got sick the last part of the test. And so, what's it called? He also points out a good lesson during that time where it's like, don't force yourself just because you think you're gonna ruin everyone's enjoyment. Because if you put yourself in danger, that's gonna ruin them. That's gonna make people ruin it more. Because there's a whole thing about oxygen levels and everything, and PSI, whatever. So, yeah, it's explained really well, and I think the turning point was when he talked to other people. When he talked to like Chisa, it was like, hey, can you help me? Like, he really wants to try doing scuba diving, and then at one point he couldn't go scuba diving lower than 18 meters because you need a license for that, right? So you could only be at the top, and going underwater more 18 meters below 18 meters is like amazing because you see so much more in terms of the aquatic, aquamarine life, right? And he's left out, but he doesn't feel bad because he's like he eventually will get there, and he has other people, and he knows that there's nothing bad about being a little bit behind in that kind of sense. He'll eventually get there. And so I thought that was a nice thing, it was a more serious moment, but like he really touches in with like how his characterization of being, really tolerant, really, how do you say this? Adaptive to the situation in a sense.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good word. Like he knows his limits.
Yeah. And so, well, except for drinking, he has no limits on that apparently.
Okay, yeah.
That's the only fault of it. But yeah, overall, he's a really good person, and yeah, I think it's a genuinely good anime. Unfortunately, they don't have a season 2. I think this anime came out in 2019, I would say. And gosh, I wish there was a season 2 because there's so much more. It's not like the anime itself is crazy, right? It's like full-on comedy, so it doesn't capture. Of course, it does the serious parts well, but it doesn't capture the overall like. I feel like there's almost a hidden message about being a grown-up, essentially. I think that's what it is, being a grown-up, right? It exaggerates the crazy parts of like, drinking, being irresponsible and everything, and people getting in scuffles with each other. But I think underlying all of that is like the tone of getting along with other people, socializing, and understanding what life is about. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I do. It is kind of like that where it's exploring life,
Yeah, definitely. It's I guess overall, if you can look at it in a more, how do you say this? If you were to perceive it more like as an actual story in terms of like, who is the character, what is the theme, why do they take the actions they do, and what their driving force is, right? I think it's an actual beautiful story in terms of that. But because the comedy is so over the top, I think people tend to forget about it or don't notice it as well as other stories,
Yeah, because they do exaggerate the comedy quite a bit, so the story can be overlooked a lot.
And I think it's a shame. And I genuinely hope there's a season 2. Unfortunately, there is no season 2 so far, and I don't think there will be a season 2 just because it's been 4 years. Usually a season 2 would usually be announced a year or two after. That's usually the timeline when it comes to animes being announced for a new season. It's very rare that 4 plus 5 plus years an anime gets a new season. World Trigger is like the sole like one of the very few exceptions in this case. And so, yeah, I think Granblue a really good anime to watch. And then after you watch the anime, I would totally suggest reading the manga, because the manga is like the comedy there is presented even more like the way it's framed is even better, I would say. And it takes it to another level because of like all the shadings and everything. Because I remember showing you a photo of it. I'm like, look at the same like manga scene and look at the same manga panel, and you were just like, oh my lord.
Yeah, it was very different. Of course, books are usually very different, or not very different, but they're different from shows or movies. So.
Yeah, and gosh, we were planning to talk about a new another anime that we watched more recently called Do It Yourself, but it's already, because I didn't expect to talk about Granblue this much. So we're getting around 25 minutes right now. I think that's good enough for an episode, so I think I'll just end it here for now. We'll talk about Do It Yourself next time, because I think there's a lot we can actually talk about in terms of that, because Do It Yourself is actually pretty unique. But we'll get to that next time. And so, I'm gonna end it here. Hopefully, there's more anime. So far, so Do It Yourself was the last anime, or not technically not the last anime, but the last major anime that we watched. Hopefully, we'll watch more. And so, as long as we keep on recording more episodes, we'll, hopefully explore more anime. But I'm gonna end it here. So I'm Jin.
And I'm Saki.
And this is The Casuals, and we'll see you next week. Bye bye.